Joining me now is Senator Graham's longtime friend and colleague and the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. You served with Lindsey Graham for about 30 years. You were elected to the House in 1996. He was finishing his first term. How did your friendship start and what was it like?
I mean, as you know, Dana, you know Lindsey well through the years too. There wasn't anybody who was a more colorful character, more passionate about the work that he was involved with, but always brought an energy and a sense of enthusiasm that was contagious to anybody that was around him. And, you know, in the very first one I was running in 1996, he and a couple of other House members at the time came out to South Dakota to campaign for me out there. I've had him in South Dakota here in the last couple of years, a couple different times. And every time he comes, you are, you know, you're just reminded of what a unique, gifted and talented individual he was. And you saw that on display whenever he was talking about an issue he cared passionately about. And of course, we all know about national security and how the strong voice he presented, his knowledge and experience. He'd been all over the world. He spoke with great knowledge and perspective, and frankly, just incredible passion for the things that were really important to America's national security interest, not only here at home, but around the world. And then, of course, in the judiciary, where he was a very strong voice there, the Budget Committee, he was the chairman, and we went through 2 reconciliation bills in this last year. Lindsey led both of those. And then, obviously, he was passionate on other issues. Pro-life, for example, something too. That community had no better friend than Lindsey Graham through the years. So it's a huge loss for institutionally for the Senate, but it's a huge loss for those of us who knew him well.
And one of the things that you just listed a long list of his sort of policy resume and interests and where he was a leader. But I think one of the things that people who knew him well maybe don't, who didn't know him well, I should say, don't understand is how much he used humor to break barriers and to break ice. Can you just share any examples of that or talk about that side of Senator Graham that I'm sure you saw maybe daily?
He was incredibly, as you know, Dan, incredibly witty and sharp. I mean, very quick-witted, which made him. Anytime I tell people, anytime you're putting together a group to have dinner, we were stuck here in the, you know, in Washington. A lot of us whose families aren't here through the years would get together, and Lindsey was the first guy you'd call because you knew that he would keep the conversation going and interesting. And he used it effectively as a communication tool as well. He was a very gifted communicator in ways that enabled him to tell stories and get a point across, a message across. And because he was so quick, I mean, he had not only sharp wit, but very acute intellectually, and was able to deliver a message. But that was a quality that many of us got the opportunity to observe and share in more smaller settings as well, where you just had a chance to talk with him, you know, either individually or in a small group. Lindsey always was somebody who had a bigger than life personality, and that came across in any setting.
Yeah, I mean, he grew up literally in a bar that his parents owned, and it was clearly that kind of setting that taught him how to be quick and how to sort of interact with people and read people and figure them out. I know that you and Senator Graham traveled the world together. You were in Baghdad in 2006, along with Susan Collins and Joe Lieberman and John McCain. How did those foreign trips go with Senator Graham and the influence that you think he had from then and then up until now on the world stage?
There were very few people that I traveled with, Dana, with the exception of John McCain, who had Lindsey's sort of gravitas on the world stage because he was out there so often and knew the issues so well and became a strong advocate for America's national security positions for sure, but also those of our allies in the world. He was incredibly respected by our allies. And so when you walked into a room or, you know, even in many cases, and when we travel out there, a forward operating base, people knew him, they were familiar with him. He had you know, an experience in the military that gave him a camaraderie, or I should say, a connection, if you will, to a lot of people who were serving the country in our military. But he also had a way of connecting with foreign leaders.
Mhm.
And you sit in a room like that with somebody like him, and you knew he was somebody that they were going to listen to. So it enabled us to get into places. It enabled us to hear from people and to share views with people that otherwise we probably wouldn't have had the chance to do.
One of the key roles that Senator Graham played over the past certainly 2 years, but even going back to President Trump's first term, was kind of an interlocutor role between Senate Republicans and your conference broadly and President Trump. I know he wasn't always successful, but he could and did call the president a lot late into the night and get him to listen and understand the Senate point of view. How much did that help you as leader?
Well, it was enormously helpful. Lindsey has been, through the years, not only a really good friend, but a very trusted advisor and somebody whose skill set enabled him to do things just like that. I mean, he had a way of talking truth and in a very candid way with leaders, and certainly the relationship he has with Senator, or with, I should say, with President Trump is very unique. And they have a way of communicating honestly with each other, and then sort of being able to walk away as friends. And I think that is a something we're really going to miss, because he was a terrific um, advocate on behalf of the Senate position, understanding what the president wanted to accomplish, working with him in order to do that, but also being very clear about what is and isn't achievable in the Senate. And his voice is going to be really, really missed in terms of the relationship that some Republicans have with the president and his team, because he was so good and so effective at talking to the president, and was so respected by the president. There was something where, even when they disagreed, he knew the president did, that Lindsey had his best interest at heart, and whatever message he was sharing with him was going to be received that way.
President Trump just posted on Truth Social a few minutes ago that he wants the South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster to appoint Senator Graham's sister Darlene to serve as interim senator. I know that that is solely up to the governor, and you don't have a vote, but you do have an opinion. What is your opinion?
I spoke to Darlene yesterday. I spoke to Government Master yesterday, and they're going to be announcing something later today, and I'll let the governor make an announcement about that. But that certainly, in my view, makes a lot of sense. I think in many respects, it would be a way of extending Lindsey's legacy here, and certainly something that, if that's what they decide to end up doing, I think there'd be a lot of support for.
Hmm. Senator Graham worked tirelessly to put together a bipartisan agreement with the president to move ahead with the Russia sanctions package. He was in Ukraine just the day before he passed away. Listen to what he said.
I'm pleased to announce, as of about 30 minutes ago, we've reached agreement with the White House on a version of the Russian sanctions bill that they will support. It means it's going to become law. So when I get back to Washington, I'm going to go with Senator Blumenthal to the Republican and Democratic leader to see if we can find time to move this Russian sanctions package that would give tools to President Trump to help end this war.
Mr. Leader, is that still going to happen? Will that package be put up for a vote to put more sanctions on Russia?
I certainly hope that we can get there to do that, Dan. I think the White House obviously had been working closely with Lindsey and his team on this. There are Democrats who are involved in it. I think there is a sanctions bill that could get 80 to 90 votes in the Senate. We've got to figure out exactly what that is. Lindsey has been working that issue for a long time. It's one of those things he's very passionate about. He wants to see a free and independent Ukraine, as all of us do, and is a big believer that economic sanctions are a huge tool for the president and his administration for us to achieve that outcome. So I'm hopeful we can get that done. It's something he's been talking about for a long time. I would say probably as in his last days, the thing that he cared the most about in terms of an accomplishment. And it would certainly be an incredible legacy for him if, in fact, we can find a path forward. It'll take Democrats and Republicans here in the Senate to do that. But I'm hopeful we can make that happen.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune, thank you so much for being on. And we are so sorry for your loss and that of everybody in the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, are really mourning the loss of their friend and colleague.
It's a big loss. Thanks, Dana.